So I'm ready to cut out the vamp. This looks like an economical place to put it as far as conserving leather. So I'll draw around this with the silver gel pen and also mark the stitch marks, and then cut it out, and I'll be ready to stitch it then to the heel piece. I'm thinning this area because this part right here will go inside of the, or under the heel piece. So this edge right here could possibly be irritating to the foot. So we get down to pretty thin right at the edge, and then I'll do the same thing on this side. The next piece that we will add to the shoe is the a toe box. There's a line across the pattern that shows you where that goes. This is totally optional. The gray shoes that I showed you there at the beginning that I wear all the time, they don't have a toe box in them, so it's kind of can see the shape of the toes in the front of the boot, but that doesn't bother me. But if you'd like it to be smoother, the same goat hide from Pergamena, since it's a vegetable tanned, it will keep its shape if you wet it and then let it dry in a certain shape, then it'll keep that shape. So this will, and this leather is kind of thin, so it's going to make just a modest little toe box, but it should make your boot look a little smoother in the front if you like that. So I got the pattern off of the vamp pattern, just fold there and you got it, and I'll cut this out with scissors. Then this area also takes skiving, so that will be the next thing we'll do. I've cut out this toe box, and I've skived all around the edge of it. The most important skiving is along here, because that piece is going to go here over your toes, and you don't want this line to be a ridge. It would probably feel uncomfortable on the top of your toes. So just a little bit more here. I see where it's still kind of dark. And I'll be ready to put cement on that. And started skiving the vamp as well. We have that same issue of wanting to be able to gather. Here we want to gather in the toes, so it kind of pops up. And if this is too thick to turn out nicely, it will keep you from seating that as good as possible. So I'm going along here. This is a new blade, so I have to be careful that I don't skive too deeply, but that looks pretty good. So I will then put cement in here, cement here. When that dries, then I'll need to punch out the holes from the upper through the toe box so that I can stitch there. I'm ready to punch out all these holes. using this 00 drive punch and my mallet. I can also do this with this spring punch. When you use this punch, this is one from Tandy's that is a 00 punch, and whenever I use this punch, I put a piece of scrap leather under where I'm punching so that this tube here will go all the way through the piece that I'm wanting to punch and then down into that extra scrap. So I can use this, go along here and punch all these holes. If I'm somewhere where it's not handy to have this block and mallet, or if my hands get tired from doing one kind of punching, I'll switch to the other. I'm ready to stitch the grommet reinforcement piece to the heel piece. So I'm starting in this hole, and we'll even out my lengths of thread. And then we'll head in this direction. So I'm going here, then I'll go over the top, and then here I will be stitching this heel piece to the vamp. So I'm using the 2 needle running stitch, so the top thread goes through the hole, and then I'll be taking this thread over the top of the other one, holding this one out of the way and coming up through this hole and giving a little tug each time. So one more stitch down here, and then holding that out of the way so that I'm not going to split the thread. And so I'll continue on around, and we'll come back when I'm ready to stitch the 2 pieces together. I'm making some progress here. I started stitching the reinforcement piece here, went around, came back to this spot, and I'm going to use the same thread to stitch the heel piece to the vamp. To do this, you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitch holes here on the heel piece and 6 on the vamp. That means that this thread that's on the back, after you've finished stitching the reinforcement piece, goes into that top hole, that 6th hole. And now that makes it even for both threads. That they will both have 5 holes now. So I'll do the same 2 needle running stitch here, and when I get to the bottom, I will tie one of those double square knots on the back side, and then I'll stitch the other side, and my upper will be complete because the toe box is in place. And I wanted to mention that you can put the toe box on the outside of the shoe to create color, or it can also have not just a straight across edge, but something more creative. And so you can have a nice color contrast if you pick something else for the toe box. And you can do the same with the eyelet reinforcement piece. This piece could be on the outside of the shoe and add even more uniqueness to your creation. If I decided that my leather was really thick and I don't need a grommet reinforcement piece, I can just stitch these 5 stitches here. Be sure to eliminate that top one and put the needles on both ends of your thread and stitch it just like you would stitch any other seam with the 2 needle running stitch. On down to the end, and then we'll do one of those double square knots and weave it in between, and we'll have the seam stitched.